So when looking at the Clone Wars, there are huge differences between the Grand Army of the Republic and the droid army used by the Confederacy of Independent Systems, but one big one is that the biological nature of the soldiers deployed by the Republic means they need medical services and they need to treat their wounded, which is very different from the way Separatists handle things. So I figured today we could discuss how the Republic handled the non-fatal casualties of the Clone Wars, and what medical treatment might have looked like for the clones, and talk about some of the equipment and institutions involved in this process. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So, this seems like it should be obvious. It's a challenge that the Republic faced that the Separatists simply didn't. If Separatist droids were damaged in battle, they could either be sent to a scrapyard, or just lumped into a big container and shipped off to some repair foundry somewhere, where they could eventually be brought back into working order. But with wounded clones, there's time-sensitive aspects, where if you don't get that clone to a medical facility fast, that clone might die, and unlike the droids, each individual clone represents a significant investment on the part of the Republic, and is a far more capable combat asset than a single battle droid. So, the Republic has a strong motivation to try to nurse these clones back to health, and get them back into a combat-capable state, which, obviously, they did quite a bit. We see a lot of clones in the TV show make a full recovery and end up back on the battlefield. So, let's just kind of dive into what that process looks like and what equipment the Republic actually set up to manage clone casualties. There's one thing I want to throw out there real quick. When I mention casualties from this point on, I'm primarily referring to the surviving casualties. Those that are wounded but not killed. So keep that in mind. Obviously, in many instances, clones that took damage in battle would die on the battlefield, as is the nature of war. But in a lot of cases, they could be medevaced to a nearby health facility and eventually to a more sophisticated Republic medical center and make a full recovery. So let's focus on those. So let's start with on the battlefield. Most clone units appeared to have with them a medic. The medic would have the medical expertise needed to treat battlefield wounds. So on the battlefield, the medic would be responsible for maintaining the health of the soldier, or at least getting them into a stable position for evacuation. Now, what did these medical evacuations is not entirely clear. It's likely that these were done on LAATs, perhaps designated medical evacuation LAATs, but we don't know for sure. They were likely moved then to a rear staging area where they would receive some more advanced medical treatment to make sure they're in a more stable condition before they could be transported to a medical center. These are mostly Haven-class space stations, which are a key part of the Republic medical infrastructure designed to support the Grand Army of the Republic during its ongoing war. A number of these Haven-class stations were set up around the galaxy and served as massive military hospitals, treating huge numbers of clone troopers that came in off the battlefields with battlefield wounds and giving them the treatment they need, whether that was time in a back-to-tank or prosthetics or whatnot, to try to make sure that they were in a fighting shape to be returned to the battlefield, or in a more serious case, to be retired from duty but not left completely non-functional. These stations, though, didn't operate alone because the Republic actually had commissioned an entire class of frigate designed specifically to support medical operations, and while they did occasionally see combat, the Pelta-class frigate, which is the frigate I'm discussing here, was primarily designed as a medical frigate to transport wounded and non-combat personnel to and from these medical stations. In fact, these medical stations are actually designed to dock with these Pelta-class frigates, which would normally be attached directly to these stations, so they would be sort of almost like a ship in a hangar. Like a TIE fighter is assigned to a Star Destroyer, these Pelta-class frigates are assigned to individual medical stations and would occasionally be transferred between them. We see these Pelta-class frigates used in a lot of military medical operations during the Clone Wars. So, the Republic built out this huge apparatus, and it wasn't just this, by the way, because they did end up recruiting a lot of civilian hospitals to help in the war effort. We see, for example, medical facilities on Coruscant helping wounded clones. And this infrastructure is massive and vast, but is only really worth paying for if you're in the middle of a galactic war, which eventually did come to an end. With the end of the Clone Wars and the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire, the nature of this medical system did shift. Ultimately, a lot of this equipment was simply abandoned. These medical stations, the Haven-class stations, were more or less just left on their own to float through space as space debris. A few of them likely fell into the hands of local governments or pirates. I'm sure some of them got donated to relief funds and private institutions that provided medical care. I'm sure if planets needed hospitals shortly after the end of the war, there were several of these donated, but a lot of them did end up completely abandoned, and the same goes for the Pelta-class frigates, which were designed primarily for carrying medical personnel. And that's how several of them fell into the hands of the Rebel Alliance, who proceeded to convert them into warships and use them in their war against the Empire. But after the end of the Clone Wars, a lot of this infrastructure was retired from its original purpose as a life-saving medical pipeline to save clones who took damage on what was, at the time, the bloodiest war the galaxy had ever seen. And it's kind of interesting to think of the fact that the Empire probably had a much harder time maintaining the medical infrastructure needed to support their military as opposed to the Republic, because the Republic's military consisted entirely of clones with the same medical history and likely the same medical future as far as, genetic ailments and such. But that's just one of the factors in the transition from clone troopers to recruited soldiers. If you'd like to learn more about that transition, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Republic military pipeline and its ultimate fate. Do you think this medical pipeline should have been kept in place by the Empire to treat their own soldiers, or do you think it makes sense to kind of leave these behind and move on to a more decentralized system for treating stormtroopers who were wounded in combat, which, by the way, was relatively rare for stormtroopers in the early days of the Empire? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars or anywhere else in science fiction, you could let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.